Zara Johnson walked through the school gates, her heart racing with anticipation. She wasn't sure what to expect on her first day at this new school. The air was thick with the weight of the unknown as she clutched her backpack straps tightly. She had moved a lot in her life, but this was different. This was her senior year, and it was the first time she had to start fresh without her mother by her side. She could still hear her mom's voice in her head, "You're strong, Zara. Don't let anyone make you feel less than you are." Her mom's passing had been a year ago, and though Zara had learned to cope with the grief, there was a hole inside her that nothing seemed to fill. After her mother's death, Zara had moved in with her grandmother in a small town. She was a bright student, always keeping to herself, always feeling like an outsider. Her new school, Eastwood High, seemed no different. It was bigger, louder, and the faces were unfamiliar, but Zara couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to step into a place where she didn't quite belong. The school loomed in front of her like a fortress, its tall brick walls towering over the courtyard where students milled about, laughing and chatting with friends. She hesitated for a moment, watching the groups of teenagers bonding over shared experiences. They were in cliques, as usual, some laughing in the shade of the old oak tree, others huddled near the basketball court. Zara felt like an intruder in a world where she didn't have a place. With a deep breath, Zara walked into the main building. Her shoes clicked sharply against the polished floor as she made her way toward the office to pick up her schedule. She tried to hold her head high, but the whispers and stares from other students made her feel exposed. "New girl," she overheard one student whisper to another. Zara tried to ignore the discomfort, but it was hard. It always was. Inside the office, a receptionist smiled at her, though there was a sense of curiosity in her eyes as she handed over Zara's schedule. "Welcome to Eastwood High. If you need any help, don't hesitate to ask," the receptionist said, her tone kind but distant. Zara nodded, murmuring a soft thank you as she walked out, clutching the papers in her hand. Her first class was English, and as she made her way to room 205, she couldn't help but feel the weight of every gaze on her. As she walked past the lockers, she could hear snippets of conversation. "Who's that?" "Never seen her before," one voice said. "She's got to be new." "I heard she's moving in with her grandma," another responded. The words weren't necessarily cruel, but they stung. It didn't matter that they weren't meant to hurt. Zara had been in this position too many times before to not feel the sting. She reached the classroom and pushed the door open, feeling all eyes shift toward her. A few students glanced up, but most were too engrossed in their own conversations to notice her. She scanned the room for a seat. Most of the desks were filled, but there was one empty seat in the back corner. Zara made her way toward it, hoping she wouldn't draw too much attention to herself. She sat down quietly, keeping her gaze down as the teacher, Mr. Carter, began the lesson. Zara tried to focus on the notes in front of her, but the feeling of being an outsider pressed on her chest. She couldn't shake the thought that she didn't belong here. She wanted to blend in, to disappear into the background and make it through the day without anyone noticing her too much. As the class continued, Zara noticed a group of students at the front, laughing and whispering among themselves. One of them, a tall boy with sandy hair and an arrogant air about him, glanced in her direction. His eyes lingered on her for just a moment too long. Zara quickly turned her gaze back to her notebook, pretending she hadn't seen him. This boy, Jason, was the kind of person Zara had learned to avoid in the past. He had that look, the kind of look that said he thought he was better than everyone else. The kind of look that made her feel small. Zara tried to ignore him, but it was hard not to notice his smirk as he caught her eye again. The bell rang to signal the end of the period, and Zara gathered her things quickly. She didn't want to stick around, didn't want to risk being the target of any more unwanted attention. But as she stood up to leave, Jason called out to her. "Hey, new girl," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. The entire class turned their attention to her. Zara's stomach twisted into knots. She hesitated for a moment, then turned to face him. What? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Jason gave her a slow, exaggerated once-over. Nice hair, he said with a smirk. Is it real or? His voice trailed off, but the insinuation was clear. Zara felt the heat rise in her chest, but she bit her lip to keep herself from reacting. She had dealt with this kind of thing before. People who didn't know how to treat others with respect. But something inside her stirred, a feeling she hadn't felt in a long time. Anger. She wasn't going to let him get to her, not this time. Before she could say anything, Mr. Carter stepped in, redirecting the class and ending the conversation. Zara hurried out of the room, her heart still racing, her thoughts swirling. She was used to being stared at, to being the center of unwanted attention. But Jason's words felt different. They stung more than usual. As she walked down the hallway to her next class, Zara's mind raced. Why did people always feel the need to judge her? It wasn't the first time she had been on the receiving end of hurtful words or insults, but it always felt the same, like a punch to the gut. Maybe it was because of her skin color. Maybe they thought she wouldn't stand up for herself. But what could she do about it? She was just one person, in a new school, in a new town. When she arrived at her next class, Zara took a deep breath and tried to shake off the encounter. She couldn't let Jason's words define her, even if they stung. She had survived worse. She would survive this too. She reminded herself that she was strong. You're strong, Zara. Don't let anyone make you feel less than you are. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, and for the first time that day, Zara felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she would make it through this. But as she sat down at her desk and glanced at the clock, the thought that haunted her still lingered in her mind: what would this school, this new place, bring her? And would she ever find a way to fit in, or would she forever remain the girl who didn't quite belong? Only time would tell. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The following morning, Zara woke up feeling a mix of nervousness and determination. After the awkward and uncomfortable encounter with Jason the day before, she knew she had to face him again. The idea of being targeted or humiliated by him made her stomach churn, but deep down, Zara knew that this was just another obstacle she had to overcome. She stood in front of the mirror for a long moment, staring at her reflection. She had always been proud of her curly hair, her dark skin, and the unique features that made her who she was. But this new school, with its strange glances and whispered conversations, made her question whether these things would be enough. She straightened her back, refusing to let the doubts win. I'm not going to let them see me sweat, she whispered to herself, fixing her hair into a neat ponytail before grabbing her backpack. The walk to school felt longer than usual, each step heavy with anticipation. When Zara arrived, she took a deep breath before walking through the gates again. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows on the ground as the students trickled in. There was a buzz in the air, an energy that seemed to pulse through the crowd. Zara felt like she was walking through a maze of students, her footsteps echoing in her mind. She couldn't avoid Jason forever, but she hoped that today might be different. Maybe he would focus on someone else, or maybe he would just leave her alone. But fate had other plans. As she stepped into the hall leading to her first class, she saw him. Jason was leaning against a locker, chatting with a group of his friends, all laughing as if they owned the world. His eyes flickered in her direction as soon as she walked into view. Zara felt the weight of his gaze on her, and for a moment, she wished she could disappear into the walls. Hey, Zara, Jason called out, his voice carrying through the hall like a challenge. He said her name with a mock sweetness, as if it was something foreign to him. Zara froze, her heart beating faster. She tried to act as if she hadn't heard him, but she knew it was no use. He was going to do this again. She felt every pair of eyes around her turn toward the confrontation, as if the whole school was waiting for the show to begin. Zara exhaled slowly, trying to keep her cool. She turned to face him, standing tall despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach. "What do you want, Jason?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. She had practiced this in her head before, no backing down, no letting him see her sweat. Jason smirked, clearly amused by her response. "I just wanted to say, nice hair," he said, dragging the words out. "Is that how you really wear it? Or are you just hiding something under there?" He glanced at his friends, who snickered at his cruel joke. Zara clenched her fists, but she refused to let her anger boil over. "It's just hair, Jason," she replied, her voice calmer than she felt. "What's your problem with it?" Jason's smirk grew wider. "Oh, no problem. Just curious, you know. It's not like people with your kind of hair usually get to walk around like they're all that." His friends laughed louder this time, and Zara felt a heat rise in her chest. It was the kind of laughter that was meant to make someone feel small, to remind them that they didn't belong. Zara wanted to scream, wanted to tell them how wrong they were, how ignorant they were, but she kept her composure. "I'm not here for your entertainment, Jason," she said, her voice steady but firm. "So, unless you're going to start treating people with some respect, I suggest you leave me alone." For a moment, there was silence. Jason's eyes narrowed, and the teasing glint in them faded for a second. Then, he let out a short laugh, almost as if he was impressed. "You're tougher than I thought," he muttered, before turning to his friends. "Guess she's not as easy to mess with as I thought." He shrugged and walked off, the others following behind, still chuckling. Zara stood there, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over her. She had faced him. She hadn't let him break her. It wasn't much, but it was a start. She had expected something worse, maybe a bigger confrontation or more insults. But for now, Jason had walked away, leaving her standing in the hallway feeling both proud and exhausted. "Nice job," a voice interrupted her thoughts. Zara turned to see a girl standing beside her. She had dark hair tied back in a messy bun and a friendly smile on her face. "I saw what happened, and I have to say, that was awesome. Most people would have just cowered, but you stood your ground." Zara blinked, surprised. "Thanks," she said, offering a small smile. "I didn't want to let him get to me, you know." The girl nodded. "I get it. It's tough, but you handled yourself really well. By the way, I'm Emily," she said, extending her hand. "I don't think we've met before. You're the new girl, right?" Zara shook Emily's hand, still processing what had just happened. "Yeah, I'm Zara. I just moved here, actually." Emily grinned. "Well, I'm glad I saw that moment. Not everyone stands up to Jason, but you did. I think we might get along just fine." For the first time since arriving at Eastwood High, Zara felt a small flicker of hope. She wasn't alone here. There were people who could see her for who she really was, not just the new girl, not just the girl who was different. As the bell rang for the next class, Emily smiled again. "I'll walk you to your next class if you want. It's tough to find your way around at first." Zara nodded gratefully. "Thanks, I'd appreciate that." And as they walked down the hall together, Zara felt the weight of the day lighten just a little. She had made it through one confrontation, and maybe, just maybe, things would get better from here. But she knew there would be more challenges ahead. Jason wasn't going to just forget what had happened. In fact, she suspected this was just the beginning. But she had something now, a small sense of confidence, a new friend, and a reminder that standing up for herself could make a difference. She wasn't just going to survive Eastwood High, she was going to thrive. The next few days at Eastwood High passed in a blur. Zara focused on keeping her head down and getting through her classes without attracting too much attention. She was starting to adjust to the routine, passing periods, crowded hallways, and the buzz of gossip and chatter, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Jason was still watching her. Every time she passed him in the halls, his gaze lingered just a little too long, his smirk still taunting her. But she wasn't going to let him get to her. Not again. Instead, Zara focused on the small victories. Like the way she'd earned Emily's friendship almost immediately. Emily, with her easygoing personality and genuine kindness, had quickly become Zara's first real friend at Eastwood. She had introduced Zara to a few other students, and by the end of the week, Zara had a small group of people she could count on. They didn't know much about her past, but for the first time in a long time, Zara didn't mind. She wasn't ready to open up just yet. Emily had been a constant support, always by Zara's side whenever Jason or his group made their presence known. The way Emily stood up for Zara, even in small ways, gave Zara a sense of comfort she hadn't realized she needed. It was something she didn't expect in this new environment, genuine friendship. Emily had even sat with Zara at lunch, introducing her to the rest of the group. Zara had been hesitant at first, but it wasn't as bad as she feared. Her new friends were a mix of people, some outgoing, some quieter like her. There was Kayla, a girl who loved art and spent most of her time sketching in her notebook. Then there was Kyle, who was a bit of a class clown, always cracking jokes and making everyone laugh. But there was also a quiet, introspective guy named Nathan, who kept mostly to himself but seemed to understand the importance of letting someone be themselves. It was during one of these lunch periods that Jason made his presence known again. Zara was sitting with Emily and the others at a corner table, chatting about an upcoming school event. They had just finished talking about a Halloween dance that was planned for next month when Zara noticed Jason walking toward them, flanked by his usual entourage. Her stomach dropped. The last thing she needed was more of his attention. "Hey, new girl," Jason called out with a casual, almost bored tone as he stopped at the edge of their table. The group fell silent, and all eyes turned to him. "How's it going? Still managing to keep up with the cool kids?" Zara kept her gaze fixed on her lunch tray, refusing to let him see how much he bothered her. "I'm fine, Jason. But I'm not really interested in talking to you right now." Jason chuckled, but there was a sharp edge to his voice. "Ooh, a little tough now, huh? You might want to watch out, new girl. You never know who you might piss off around here." His eyes flicked over to Emily, who was staring at him defiantly. Emily didn't flinch. "Jason, maybe you should leave. You're just trying to stir up trouble for no reason." She was calm, but Zara could tell that her friend wasn't backing down. Jason's smirk faltered, but only for a moment. He glanced at his friends, who were now looking at him like they expected him to do something. Jason took a step forward, his voice lowering. You might want to think about who you're sticking up for, Emily. I'd hate for you to find out the hard way." There was a thinly veiled threat in his words, and for the first time, Zara saw that he wasn't just trying to get under her skin, he was trying to intimidate Emily as well. But before Zara could respond, someone else stepped in. "Jason, leave them alone." Zara turned to see Nathan standing up from his seat, his normally quiet demeanor replaced with an assertiveness that surprised her. Jason didn't seem fazed, but the rest of his friends looked a little uncertain. Nathan wasn't exactly the type to start trouble, but something in his voice commanded attention. "You're the one causing problems, not them. So why don't you go back to whatever nonsense you were doing before you decided to show up here?" Jason stared at Nathan for a beat, his smirk slowly fading. There was a tension in the air, and for a moment, it felt like the entire cafeteria had stopped moving, as if waiting for someone to make the next move. Jason seemed to consider it, then let out a short laugh. "Whatever, man," he muttered, shaking his head. "You're really going to stick up for her?" He pointed at Zara, but there was less malice in his voice this time. "Fine, have it your way." He turned and walked away, his group following behind him, still snickering. Zara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She wasn't sure what to make of what just happened, but one thing was clear, Jason had backed down. Nathan had stepped in for her, and Emily, and they hadn't given Jason the satisfaction of seeing them cower. It was a small victory, but it meant something. As Jason's group retreated to the other side of the cafeteria, Emily turned to Nathan, a surprised look on her face. "You stood up to Jason. I didn't know you had it in you." Nathan shrugged, his usual quiet demeanor returning. "He's been messing with people for too long. I don't really like seeing that." He glanced at Zara, his expression unreadable but firm. "I just don't think it's right." Zara smiled at him, a genuine smile that made her feel a little lighter. "Thanks, Nathan. I didn't expect that, but I really appreciate it." He nodded, giving her a soft, almost shy smile. "No problem." The rest of the lunch period passed without incident, but Zara couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Jason might have been the one who had been trying to make her feel small, but now, for the first time, she had people who would stand by her when she needed them. It felt like she wasn't just surviving anymore, she was finally becoming a part of something. The days after Jason's confrontation in the cafeteria were quieter, but the undercurrent of tension still simmered beneath the surface. Zara couldn't shake the feeling that Jason hadn't just let things go. He might have backed off for now, but there was something in the way he looked at her, something that suggested he was plotting, waiting for the right moment to strike again. She tried to push these thoughts to the back of her mind as she moved through the school day. Jason's taunts and the moments of discomfort she'd faced during the first few days at Eastwood were slowly becoming distant memories, replaced by the small victories that had begun to accumulate. Emily continued to be a constant support, and Nathan's unexpected defense of her had created an unspoken bond between them. She was no longer just the new girl. She was starting to carve out a place for herself. The weekend was coming up, and Zara was looking forward to a few days where she could just relax and take a breath. It felt like she was getting a handle on her new life. But of course, nothing ever stays calm for long. It was Friday afternoon when it all started to unravel again. Zara was walking to her next class, a little distracted by a text from her mom about their plans for the weekend, when she saw Jason again. This time, he was standing by the lockers near the back of the school, talking with one of his friends. He wasn't laughing or mocking anyone, he was just standing there, a little too close to her path. Zara's stomach flipped. There was a quiet stillness in the air as if the whole school had collectively paused in anticipation. She knew he wasn't just going to let her walk by without saying something. And sure enough, as she neared, Jason turned his head toward her. "Hey, Zara," he called out in that same mocking tone. "Didn't see you last night. I guess you were too busy hanging out with your little friends." Zara stopped in her tracks, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the eyes of the students around her turning toward the scene. Jason's voice had carried, and it seemed like everyone in the hallway was now watching. "Is there a problem, Jason?" Zara asked, trying to keep her voice steady. She wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing her hesitate, even though her hands were clenched tightly at her sides. Jason smiled, a cruel twist of his lips. "Nah, no problem. Just wondering why you think you're so special all of a sudden. You really think anyone here cares about your little rebellion?" Zara's stomach churned. She knew exactly what he was doing. He was trying to isolate her, make her feel like she was overreacting. Like she didn't belong. "I'm not rebelling," Zara said firmly. "I'm just not going to let you treat people like garbage." Jason's eyes narrowed. For a moment, his smile disappeared, replaced by a look of quiet anger. "You think you can stand up to me? You really don't get it, do you?" He took a step toward her, closing the distance between them, his voice lowering into a menacing growl. "I don't like being ignored, Zara. You've made a mistake." Zara's breath caught in her throat, but she held her ground. She wasn't going to back down. "Maybe it's you who doesn't get it, Jason," she said, her voice stronger now. "You can't intimidate me anymore." Jason's expression faltered, just for a second, and Zara could see the flicker of doubt cross his face. He was used to people backing down, used to watching people fold when he made them feel small. But Zara wasn't like the others. She wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. For a brief moment, Jason seemed to consider her words. Then, with a dismissive wave of his hand, he sneered. "You're not worth the trouble, Zara. But don't get too comfortable, all right?" His tone was a warning, but it was still tinged with uncertainty. He turned and walked off, his friends following behind, leaving Zara standing there in the middle of the hallway, heart pounding. She let out a shaky breath. She had done it. She had stood her ground again. But she knew deep down that this wasn't the end. Jason wouldn't just let it go. The tension between them was only going to grow, and she could feel it building like a storm on the horizon. As the bell rang and the hallway began to clear out, Emily appeared at her side, her face a mix of concern and admiration. "You okay?" she asked softly, her eyes scanning Zara's face. Zara nodded, though she couldn't help the small tremor in her voice. "Yeah. I'm fine. I'm starting to think Jason won't let this go." Emily frowned. "He's definitely got something against you. But don't let him get in your head, okay? You've got people who have your back. I've got your back." Zara smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over her. "Thanks, Emily. I don't know what I'd do without you." Emily grinned. "You'd probably still be kicking Jason's but just as hard. But seriously, don't let him get to you. He's all talk. And we'll keep backing you up." Zara felt a warmth spread through her at the thought. She had friends now. She wasn't alone in this fight. And while Jason might still be trying to undermine her, she had learned one thing for sure: she could stand up to him. She wouldn't let him win. The rest of the day passed uneventfully, but Zara's mind kept returning to what had just happened. She knew Jason wasn't done with her. But she was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, she could handle whatever he threw her way. And with Emily, Nathan, and the rest of her friends in her corner, she wasn't going to let him break her. No matter how much he tried. The following week was a test of patience. Zara could feel the tension in the air whenever Jason was nearby. He had made it clear that he wasn't going to let her get away with standing up to him. But he had also learned something important: Zara wasn't afraid of him. And for the first time in a long time, he was starting to realize that his usual tactics weren't working. Zara wasn't going to be the shy, quiet girl who kept her head down. Not anymore. It was during second period on a Tuesday when things really started to take a turn. Zara was sitting in English class, flipping through the pages of her book, trying to focus on the lesson, when she heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching her desk. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. The air in the room shifted, and the quiet whispers from the students around her seemed to intensify. Jason had arrived. "What's up, Zara?" His voice was dripping with mockery, a tone he had perfected over the years. She could almost hear the smirk on his face without even having to look. Zara took a deep breath and kept her eyes trained on the teacher at the front of the class, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. "Not much, Jason. What's up with you?" Jason laughed, a low, condescending sound. "Oh, you're still playing it cool, huh? Well, don't get too comfortable, princess. I'm just getting started." He leaned against the back of her chair, his presence invading her personal space. She could feel his breath on the back of her neck, but she refused to react. She knew that any sign of weakness would only give him more ammunition. But what she didn't expect was the feeling that crept up on her next. A slow, cold dread that coiled in her chest as she realized that Jason wasn't just trying to make her uncomfortable anymore. He was testing her. He was pushing her, trying to see how far he could go before she broke. "You know," Jason continued, his voice lowering so only she could hear, "you've got some nerve, standing up to me. Most people would be shaking in their boots by now, but you just keep on acting like you don't care. You think you're something special, huh?" Zara clenched her fists under the desk. This was it. She couldn't ignore him anymore. The weight of his words, the constant pressure, it was all building up, threatening to break her. She forced herself to look up at him, her gaze hardening. I don't think I'm special, Jason. I just don't think you're worth my time. His face twisted, and for the briefest of moments, his confident exterior cracked. Jason wasn't used to being dismissed. But before he could retort, the teacher, Mrs. Mitchell, called out from the front of the room. Jason, Zara, is there a problem back there? The class had fallen silent, all eyes on them now. Zara felt the weight of every stare, but she didn't back down. Jason's eyes flicked over to the teacher, then back to Zara. Nah, Mrs. Mitchell, he said, his voice suddenly smooth, as if nothing had happened. Just having a little chat with my new friend here. The tension in the room was palpable as Mrs. Mitchell eyed them both. Well, keep it down, please. We're here to learn. Jason straightened up and walked back to his seat without another word, but not before shooting Zara a final, venomous glare. She couldn't help but feel a small, triumphant smile tug at the corner of her lips. She hadn't given him the satisfaction of seeing her sweat, and that meant something. But the relief didn't last long. After class, things took a turn for the worse. As Zara was gathering her things, she noticed Jason standing near the door, waiting for her. The hallway was crowded with students heading to their next classes, but Jason stood out, his posture tense, his jaw clenched in frustration. Hey, Zara, he called out before she could walk past him, his voice dangerously low. She stopped, her heart rate picking up. She knew this wasn't over. He wasn't done with her yet. What do you want now, Jason? Jason's eyes narrowed. I've been thinking about what you said earlier. About me not being worth your time. He took a step closer, and his words dropped to a whisper. You're going to regret that. I promise you, you'll regret it. Zara didn't flinch, though she could feel the coldness creeping up her spine. You really think I'm afraid of you? For a moment, Jason said nothing. The hallway seemed to grow quieter, the noise of students fading into the background. And then, without warning, he reached out and shoved her shoulder, not hard enough to hurt, but enough to send a clear message. Zara stumbled slightly but caught herself. Her anger flared, but she held her ground. She wasn't going to let him provoke her. Not now. Not ever again. What's the matter, Jason? Can't handle a little pushback. Zara's voice was cold, steely. She wasn't going to let him break her. Jason was about to retort, but at that exact moment, Emily appeared out of nowhere, stepping between them. Is there a problem here, Jason? Emily's voice was sharp, and her posture was firm. She wasn't backing down, not one bit. Jason looked taken aback by the sudden intervention, his eyes flashing with annoyance. But when he saw the determined look on both Zara and Emily's faces, he seemed to realize that this wasn't going to be as easy as he thought. With a frustrated grunt, he stepped back. Whatever. This isn't over, Zara, he sneered before walking off with his friends in tow, muttering something under his breath. Zara stood there, her body still tense, but she exhaled a shaky breath. Thanks, Emily, Zara said, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I can't keep doing this. It's like he won't stop until he breaks me. Emily turned to her, her expression softening. He won't break you, Zara. You're stronger than you think. And we're not going to let him do that. Zara felt the weight of her words, and for the first time in a long while, she believed them. She wasn't in this alone anymore. She had people who cared about her, people who would help her stand tall, no matter what Jason threw her way. But deep down, Zara knew this was just the beginning. The tension with Jason was reaching its breaking point. And sooner or later, something would snap. She just hoped she would be ready when it did. Zara didn't know if she was ready, but she had no choice but to brace herself. The days after her confrontation with Jason, though tense, were oddly quiet. It was as if the storm had calmed for a moment, letting her catch her breath before the inevitable crash. For the first time in a while, she started to feel like things were settling down. She sat at lunch with Emily and Nathan, the three of them nestled in a corner of the cafeteria. They talked about their weekend plans, joked about the upcoming school dance, and for a brief moment, Zara felt like she had a life that wasn't dictated by Jason's cruelty. It was nice, but she couldn't fully relax. She knew that it wouldn't last. Jason was still out there, waiting for the right moment to strike. That afternoon, as Zara walked through the crowded hallway between classes, she had the unsettling feeling that someone was watching her. She tried to brush it off, but the sensation persisted, gnawing at her. Her pace quickened as she made her way toward her next class, but the feeling didn't dissipate. When she turned the corner, she saw him. Jason was leaning casually against the lockers, as if he had been waiting for her. His eyes locked onto hers the moment she appeared. For a second, Zara's heart skipped a beat. She had hoped, vainly, that this would all blow over. But now, she saw the storm coming. "Hey, Zara," Jason called, his voice dripping with fake sweetness. "I've been meaning to talk to you." Zara stopped in her tracks, her body going rigid. She wasn't in the mood to play games anymore. "What is it, Jason? You've made your point. You can stop now." Jason pushed off the lockers, walking toward her with a slow, calculated step. "Oh, I'm not finished. You think you can just stand up to me and expect everything to be fine? That's cute. But it's not how things work around here." Zara's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "I'm not scared of you, Jason. If you're looking for a fight, you'll have to do better than this." A slow, mocking smile spread across Jason's face as he leaned in closer. "You don't get it, do you? I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to remind you of your place." Zara's stomach twisted in a way that felt both furious and cold. She could feel the weight of his words sinking into her skin, but she refused to let him see her tremble. "You've made that clear, Jason. But I'm not playing your games anymore. I've got nothing to prove to you." Jason's expression darkened, and for a moment, he said nothing. Then, with a sharp breath, he stepped back, his eyes narrowing into slits. "You think you're so tough, huh? Fine. But you won't be able to hide from me forever." With one last look of contempt, he turned and walked away, his friends trailing behind him like shadows. Zara stood there, frozen for a moment. She had faced him down, and it felt like a victory in some ways. But deep down, she knew Jason wouldn't let it go. This wasn't over. It was only just beginning. When the bell rang, signaling the start of her next class, Zara hurried to her seat, her thoughts in a whirlwind. She tried to focus on the lecture, but Jason's words kept circling in her mind. "You won't be able to hide from me forever." It was a threat, clear as day. And she had a sinking feeling that he meant it. Later that day, she met up with Emily and Nathan after school. The three of them were sitting outside, enjoying the last of the warm sun, when Emily broke the silence. "Hey, I saw Jason talking to you this afternoon. Are you okay?" Her voice was laced with concern. Zara sighed and ran a hand through her hair. "Yeah, I'm fine. He's trying to get under my skin again. Nothing I can't handle." Nathan, ever the optimist, tried to lighten the mood. "Don't let him get to you, Zara. He's all bark and no bite. You've been holding your own so far." Zara appreciated their support, but she couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in her gut. Jason was playing a game with her, and she wasn't sure how far he was willing to go to win. The truth was, Jason had always been in control, and now that control was slipping away. But as he got more desperate, Zara knew, things could get uglier. And she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep holding him off. That night, as she lay in bed, the familiar weight of fear settled in her chest. She couldn't sleep. It felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Something had to give, and Zara had no idea what it would be. The next day, as she walked into school, a sense of dread washed over her. The halls felt more crowded, the whispers louder. Her eyes darted around, looking for Jason, but there was no sign of him. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that he was lurking somewhere, waiting for his next move. She had made it this far, but she knew the storm was coming. And when it hit, it would hit hard. The next few days passed in a blur of tension. Zara was hyper-aware of her surroundings, constantly scanning the hallways, the classrooms, and even the cafeteria for Jason. She couldn't afford to be caught off guard again. His threats were no longer just empty words, there was a sense of malice behind every interaction, like a storm gathering strength, just waiting to break. Jason hadn't approached her directly since that confrontation in the hallway, but the atmosphere had shifted. He wasn't as vocal, but his presence was still felt. It was in the way people looked at her when he walked by, those sideways glances, those whispered conversations. It was in the way Jason's friends had started making pointed comments in passing, as though trying to remind her of her place in the social hierarchy of Eastwood High. Zara tried to focus on her classes, but every moment of peace felt temporary. Every time she found herself distracted by the comfort of normalcy, she couldn't help but be reminded of the fact that Jason's rage was just beneath the surface, waiting to boil over. It wasn't until Wednesday that things started to take a turn for the worse. Zara was walking out of chemistry class, her mind racing through her notes, when she heard it. A loud crash echoed from the hallway just as she stepped into the corridor. Startled, she looked up to see a group of students gathered around, their eyes wide and eager. Jason stood in the middle of the crowd, looking smug as ever. And there, on the floor, was her lunch tray, its contents scattered across the hallway in a mess of food and drink. Zara's heart sank, her eyes scanning the area for the culprit. It wasn't hard to figure out who had caused the mess. Jason smirked when he saw her approach, his eyes flashing with triumph. "Oops. Guess I didn't see you there," he said sarcastically, his voice dripping with mock innocence. Zara froze, her mind racing. Her lunch, her brief moment of normalcy, was on the floor, ruined. It felt like a cruel slap in the face. This was no accident. Jason had done this on purpose. She could feel the heat rising in her chest. She was furious, but she knew she couldn't let him see her break. She'd already shown him that she wasn't afraid. But this? This was different. He wasn't just messing with her anymore, he was trying to humiliate her. In front of everyone. For a long moment, she said nothing. She just stared at him, her fingers trembling slightly as she clutched her books to her chest. Jason's friends chuckled behind him, nudging each other like this was some kind of game. But it wasn't a game. It was a message. Jason was trying to assert his control, to make sure she knew who was in charge. "Are you just going to stand there, or are you going to clean it up?" Jason taunted, his voice louder now, meant to draw even more attention. Something inside Zara snapped. She had dealt with his taunts, his bullying, his empty threats. But this? This was crossing the line. She had been patient. She had taken the high road. But Jason had no idea who he was dealing with. Zara took a deep breath, stepping forward with purpose. She bent down and picked up the mess, not bothering to look at him or anyone else around her. The laughter around her began to quiet down, but Zara didn't care. She wasn't going to give Jason the satisfaction of seeing her lose control. Instead, she picked up the tray, carefully stacking the items back together, even though she knew it was futile. She wasn't going to clean up for him. She wasn't going to let him make her feel small anymore. As she stood up, her gaze locked with Jason's. "You want to make a scene, Jason," she said, her voice even, her eyes unwavering. "Fine. But I'm not going to let you bully me anymore." Not now, not ever. For the first time, Jason's smirk faltered. The smug expression that had become his trademark faded just a little, replaced by a flash of uncertainty. The crowd around them had gone silent, watching the standoff. Zara could feel the weight of their gazes, but she didn't flinch. She wasn't the same girl who had walked into this school weeks ago. She was stronger, and Jason was starting to realize that. "What's the matter, Jason?" she continued, her voice rising just a little. "Too scared to face me one-on-one? You have to hide behind your friends to feel powerful." The crowd shifted uncomfortably, and Zara could see that Jason was losing control of the situation. For once, he was the one on the defensive. The laughter had stopped. No one was backing him up this time. He was alone. But Jason wasn't the type to admit defeat so easily. His face flushed with anger, and for a moment, Zara thought he might actually do something. He took a step toward her, his fists clenched, his jaw set. But then something unexpected happened. Enough. It was Emily. She had appeared from behind the crowd, her presence commanding and strong. Zara hadn't even realized that Emily was there, but now she could feel her friend's support without even needing to look at her. Emily stepped in front of Zara, her gaze fixed firmly on Jason. "You want to mess with Zara? Fine," Emily said, her voice clear and unyielding. "But you will not treat her like this. Not in front of me, not in front of anyone. You're done, Jason." Jason froze, his face going pale as the reality of the situation hit him. His friends were no longer laughing. In fact, they were shifting awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable with the turn of events. Emily wasn't backing down, and neither was Zara. Jason opened his mouth, but whatever he was going to say was cut off by the bell ringing, signaling the end of the period. Without another word, Jason turned and stormed off, his friends trailing behind him, their heads down in defeat. The crowd began to disperse, and the silence that had descended upon the hallway started to fade. Zara stood there, still gripping the lunch tray in her hand, her heart pounding in her chest. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was exhilaration. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she had won. Not because of what she had done to Jason, but because she had stood up for herself. She had refused to be intimidated, to be silenced. And she hadn't done it alone. "You were amazing back there," Emily said, her voice soft but full of admiration. "You showed him who's boss." Zara smiled, her heart light despite the tension still buzzing in the air. "Thanks, Emily. I couldn't have done it without you." Together, they walked off to their next class, the weight of the confrontation still hanging in the air, but now, Zara felt something new. A sense of power, of control. And no matter what Jason tried next, she was ready. It had been a week since the confrontation in the parking lot, but the unease still lingered in the pit of Zara's stomach. Though Jason hadn't made another direct move against her, she knew better than to think that meant everything was calm. It was the calm before the storm. She could feel the tension thick in the air, like a storm cloud just waiting to burst. Zara went through her days, keeping her head down, focusing on her studies, and staying close to Emily and Nathan. At school, she felt like she was walking on eggshells, always hyper-aware of her surroundings. Jason had gone quiet, but Zara knew he wasn't finished. He was plotting something. He wasn't someone who could just walk away quietly, especially not after being embarrassed by a girl like her. That afternoon, as she walked to her car after school, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The air felt heavy, the kind of oppressive silence that happens just before everything changes. She had been looking forward to a quiet evening at home, but instead, she found herself stuck in the parking lot, unease clawing at her. And then she saw him. Jason. Leaning against her car. His hands were shoved into his pockets, his gaze fixed coldly on her as if waiting for her to notice him. Zara froze. Her heart skipped a beat, but she wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing her panic. She straightened her back and walked toward her car, but her pulse was already racing. "What do you want, Jason?" she asked, keeping her voice steady despite the unease creeping up her spine. Jason didn't respond immediately. He just looked at her for a long moment, that familiar smug grin spreading across his face. His posture was casual, like he was in control of the situation, like he owned the space. Zara refused to give in. "You've been quiet for a while," she said, her tone guarded. "What's the deal? Finally decided to let me be?" Jason chuckled, the sound low and mocking. "You think I'm done with you? Zara, you're so naive. Just because I haven't been in your face every day doesn't mean I'm backing off." Zara's chest tightened. She knew what he was getting at. Jason wasn't just trying to intimidate her anymore. He was making his move, showing her that he still had control, that he could make her life a living hell if he wanted to. "I'm not scared of you, Jason," Zara said, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. She was done running. She'd been clear about that. But now, standing in front of him, she felt a cold pit of dread in her stomach. Jason pushed off the car, taking a step closer to her. His eyes flashed with something darker now, something dangerous. "You don't get it, do you?" His voice was quieter, but it was more menacing now. "I didn't come here to scare you. I came here to remind you that you don't get to win. You don't get to walk around like you're some hero because you stood up to me once. People like you, people who think they're above everyone else, don't get to have a happy ending." Zara's heart pounded. She could feel the weight of his words, the truth in them. He wasn't going to let her go. He wasn't going to let her just exist in peace. He was going to make her suffer for standing up for herself. But she wasn't going to give him that power. "I don't care what you think, Jason. You can't control me anymore. You're not the boss of me," she said, standing her ground. Jason smiled, but it wasn't a smile of victory. It was a smile of someone who was about to unleash something worse than she could imagine. "You think this is over? You think this is just about me and you? You're wrong. I'm not the only one you've pissed off." Zara's blood ran cold. What did he mean? What was he talking about? "What do you mean?" she asked, though she had a sinking feeling she already knew. Jason's grin widened. "Let's just say you're not the only one who's made enemies around here. There are people who have been watching you, Zara. People who don't like the way you've been shaking things up. You've stirred the pot, and now, you're going to find out what happens when you mess with the wrong people." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Zara took a step back, her mind racing. Was Jason working with others? Had he really rallied a group to go after her? The thought made her stomach churn. Before she could process any more, Jason took one last look at her, his face shifting from cocky to something more calculating. "You'll see soon enough. I'm just getting started." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Zara standing in the parking lot, the evening air suddenly feeling much colder than before. Her legs felt weak, but she didn't let herself collapse. Not yet. She was still standing. But now, everything had changed. Jason wasn't just trying to ruin her life, he was planning something bigger. Something that she wasn't prepared for. Zara didn't know who else was involved, but she knew one thing for sure. She was in deeper than she had realized, and the only way out was to keep pushing forward. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was Emily. "You okay? Just heard some stuff about Jason. I think he's been stirring up trouble with some other people. Be careful." Zara's fingers tightened around the phone. Emily's message only confirmed what Jason had hinted at. This wasn't just about him. There were others, people who had been watching her, waiting for the right moment to strike. And if she wasn't careful, she'd end up paying the price. Zara got in her car, her mind spinning. This was no longer about high school drama. This was real. Jason had played his cards, and now it was up to her to figure out how to beat him at his own game. Later that night, as Zara sat in her room, the weight of the situation still heavy on her shoulders, Emily and Nathan texted her again. They were both worried. And she couldn't blame them. She was worried too. She felt the urge to talk to them, to figure out what to do next. But deep down, Zara knew it wasn't just about finding a solution. It was about surviving what was coming, and being ready to face it, no matter what. As the evening stretched on, she could only think about one thing: Jason wasn't finished with her. And she had no idea what he was planning next. But she was ready for it. She had to be. Zara spent the next few days with a constant knot in her stomach. Jason's warning still echoed in her mind, the memory of his last words like a dark cloud hanging over her. He wasn't done with her, and from what he'd said, there were others involved, people she couldn't see but who were lurking just out of view. It was as if the game had changed entirely, and she had no choice but to play along. School became a battlefield. Every step she took, every glance she caught from across the hall, made her feel like she was being watched. She tried her best to keep her head down, staying close to Emily and Nathan, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing just beyond her line of sight. It was Tuesday when things finally took a turn for the worse. Zara had just sat down at lunch when Emily pulled her aside, her face tight with concern. "Zara, you need to see this," she said, pulling out her phone. Zara frowned as Emily handed it to her. On the screen was a post, a picture of her taken from behind, walking down the hall after school the previous day. It was accompanied by a message. "She thinks she's untouchable. Let's remind her where she belongs." Zara's stomach dropped. The post had clearly been shared from one of the anonymous accounts Jason's friends used to spread rumors. A chill ran down her spine. This wasn't just Jason anymore. This was a coordinated attack, and it was growing worse by the minute. "What the hell is this?" Zara muttered, staring at the screen in disbelief. The post had hundreds of comments already. Some were just plain cruel, others were more subtle, whispers of how Zara didn't belong, how she was just a problem to deal with. Emily reached out, placing a hand on Zara's arm. "This is getting out of hand. You need to report this to someone. A teacher. Principal Weston, maybe." But Zara shook her head. "It won't do anything. Jason's too smart for that. He knows how to cover his tracks. They're all covering for him." Her voice shook, but she refused to let herself crumble. She wasn't going to let Jason win, not this time. She had fought too hard to let him take away her peace again. But as the day went on, things only got worse. The whispers in the hallways grew louder, the stares more obvious. Zara felt like a target painted on her back. It was like the entire school had turned against her in the span of a few hours. By the time the final bell rang, Zara was exhausted, both mentally and emotionally. As she packed her things into her bag, she noticed someone approaching her desk in the classroom. It was Nathan. "Zara," he said, his voice low. "We need to talk. About Jason." Zara looked up, meeting his eyes. "I know. I saw the post. It's getting bad, Nathan. I don't know what to do." Nathan hesitated for a moment, glancing around as if making sure no one was listening. "I know a guy. His name's Jake. He used to be pretty tight with Jason, but he's not in that group anymore. He might know something useful." Zara frowned. "How do you know he'll help?" Nathan shrugged, his expression serious. "I don't, but we don't have many options right now. If Jason's involved with more people, we need to find out who. This isn't just about you and him anymore. It's bigger." Zara thought about it for a moment. She was tired of playing defense. She needed to take control, to fight back in some way. And if Jake could help, maybe it was worth a shot. "Okay," she said finally. I'll meet him. That evening, Zara met Nathan and Emily at a small cafe in town. They had arranged to meet Jake there, a kid from another school who had known Jason in the past. He wasn't much older than they were, but there was something in his eyes, an edge, a hint of rebellion, that made Zara believe he knew the kind of trouble Jason was capable of. When Jake walked in, Zara recognized him instantly. He was tall, with messy brown hair and a piercing gaze that seemed to take everything in, like he was always calculating his next move. He gave them a small nod as he slid into the booth, and for a moment, there was an awkward silence. Nathan was the first to speak. "Jake, thanks for meeting us. We need information. About Jason. And the people he's working with." Jake's eyes flickered toward Zara before he spoke. "Jason's a piece of work. But he's not the only one you need to worry about. He's got a whole crew behind him, people who would do anything to see you fall." Zara's heart skipped a beat. "Who are they?" Jake leaned in, lowering his voice. "I can't say much, but I can tell you this. You're not dealing with high school drama here. There are people outside this school who know about what's been going on. People who are willing to back Jason up, even if it means causing real harm." Zara felt a chill run through her. "What are they going to do?" Jake hesitated for a moment, then gave her a grim look. "Whatever it takes to break you. Jason's not going to stop until he gets what he wants. And if you don't stand up to him, really stand up to him, he's going to take everything from you. He's already made his move, and now he's just waiting for the right moment to strike." The weight of Jake's words hit Zara hard. This wasn't just about surviving the next few weeks at school. It wasn't just about dealing with Jason's bullying. It was about something much bigger, and much more dangerous. Zara swallowed hard. "What do I do?" Jake's eyes softened, a flicker of something like empathy in them. "You have to go after them. You can't let them have the upper hand anymore. Find out who's behind this, figure out what they want. And don't back down. They're counting on you to be scared. Don't give them that." Zara felt a fire ignite inside her. She wasn't going to let Jason, or anyone, control her life anymore. If it meant going up against a group of people who were willing to tear her down, she would do it. She'd fight back, no matter the cost. "I won't," Zara said firmly. "I'm not backing down." Jake nodded, his expression grim. "Good. Because it's only going to get harder from here. But if you stay strong, you might just beat them at their own game." As the conversation ended, Zara felt the full weight of what she had to do. The path ahead wasn't clear, but one thing was certain, she was no longer playing defense. She was going on the offense. She just hoped she was ready for the battle ahead. The next day, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking through a fog. Every person she passed seemed like a potential threat. The hallway buzzed with whispers, and the moment she entered the classroom, her gaze swept over the faces of her classmates, trying to figure out who was with Jason and who was just caught in the crossfire. The post had made her a target, no doubt. But it was worse than that. The students who hadn't previously cared about her, or even knew who she was, now had an opinion. It was a mix of judgment, curiosity, and malice that made her skin crawl. She wasn't just the girl Jason had tried to bully anymore. She was the girl everyone was watching, waiting to see if she'd break. Zara sat at her desk, trying to focus on the lesson, but her mind kept racing. Jason and his crew weren't just playing games, they were trying to destroy her. They were using social media as a weapon, setting up a narrative that painted her as a target. And, worst of all, they were smart about it. They knew exactly how to manipulate people into thinking she was the problem. But Zara wasn't going to give in. She couldn't afford to. During lunch, Emily and Nathan met her by the lockers. They were both clearly on edge, and Zara could tell they'd been talking about the situation. Emily's eyes were wide with concern, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Have you heard anything else?" Emily asked as they walked together toward the cafeteria. There's more talk going around. People are saying Jason's got some big plan. They say he's got a friend on the inside. Zara froze. What does that mean? A friend on the inside? Who? Nathan shook his head, his expression grim. No one knows for sure. But if Jason's using people on the inside, we've got a serious problem. We can't just go after him. He's got connections, and he's got people who are willing to help him. Zara felt a sinking feeling in her chest. This is bigger than just high school drama, isn't it? Emily nodded. It always was. I mean, Jason's got some serious people skills. If he's involved in this, it's more than just him being a bully. He's leading something. The idea that Jason might be pulling strings behind the scenes made Zara feel nauseous. She knew he had some power in school, but if he had allies outside of their bubble, people who could do more than just spread rumors, she was in real danger. But Zara wasn't going to let him intimidate her. Not now. She needed to take control of the situation, but first, she had to know who she was dealing with. That afternoon, she met with Jake again. The small cafe they'd chosen for their secret meetings had become their headquarters of sorts. It was tucked away on the corner of a quiet street, where they could speak freely without worrying about prying ears. Jake was already there when Zara arrived, sitting in the same booth. His eyes scanned her face, noting the tension in her features. What's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost. Zara didn't waste time. You said Jason wasn't acting alone. He's got people. People who are inside the school, helping him. Who are they? Jake leaned back in his seat, crossing his arms over his chest. It's not just about school anymore, Zara. Jason's involved with some serious people. I've told you before, he's got connections, more than just some kids trying to ruin your life. There are people with money and power who are backing him up. Zara blinked, stunned. Money and power? I thought we were just talking about high school cliques, Jake. Are you saying Jason's linked to adults? Jake nodded, but his expression was hard to read. Yeah. He's not just a bully anymore. He's part of a bigger operation. And he's learned how to use people to get what he wants. What you're dealing with, Zara, it's way beyond a few pranks in the hallway. This is manipulation on a whole new level. Zara could feel the blood drain from her face. Are you telling me that Jason's working with adults? Like, outside the school? That he's involved in something illegal? Jake hesitated, then gave a tight nod. I don't know how deep it goes. But I know Jason's got a network. He's not just messing with your reputation. He's using you to get to something bigger, something he wants. Zara swallowed hard. Her thoughts were racing. This was no longer about being a victim of petty high school drama. Jason was orchestrating something much more dangerous. She could no longer rely on simply standing up to him in school. She needed to understand the full scope of the threat. So, what do I do now? She asked, her voice firm despite the panic bubbling under the surface. Jake leaned forward, his expression serious. You need to gather intel. Find out who his connections are. If you want to fight back, you need to know who's in this with him. And don't think you can do it alone. This is going to take everyone you trust. Zara looked up, her heart pounding. I can't do this alone. I need your help, Jake. I need to know who's backing Jason. Jake stared at her for a long moment, and then he nodded slowly. Okay. I'll see what I can do. But I'm warning you, Zara, this isn't just about high school anymore. Once you start digging, you won't be able to stop. And if you're not careful, you'll find yourself in way deeper than you thought. Zara nodded, her jaw clenched. She wasn't backing down. Not now, not ever. As she left the cafe that evening, her mind was swirling with the new information. Jason's operation wasn't something she could handle alone. But she wasn't going to back off, not with so much on the line. If Jason wanted a fight, she'd give him one. She just had to make sure she was ready for everything he would throw at her, and then some. As she walked home, her thoughts lingered on Jake's warning. The deeper she went, the more dangerous it became. But for the first time in weeks, Zara felt like she was in control of the situation. And she wasn't about to let go of that control now. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The days following her conversation with Jake felt like an eternity. Zara's mind was constantly preoccupied with the new information. Jason's connections outside of school, his ties to adults, and the deeper, darker side of the situation were starting to form a grim picture in her mind. She couldn't afford to make any mistakes, and every move she made now had to be calculated. Zara knew she had to tread carefully. One wrong step, and everything she had been working toward could come crashing down around her. But she couldn't turn back now. She spent the next few days observing Jason more closely, paying attention to every little interaction, every subtle gesture, every moment where he seemed to slip out of the public eye. Jason wasn't the type to sit still, and neither was she. He always had people around him, a small crew of loyal followers who hung on his every word. Zara couldn't help but notice how their eyes would occasionally glance toward her, as though they knew something she didn't. It was unsettling, but it gave her a clue. That afternoon, Zara met up with Nathan and Emily at the usual spot, near the back of the school, where the tree line separated the campus from the street. "I've been watching Jason," Zara began, her voice low and urgent. "He's got a tight group around him, but there's something bigger going on. He's not just messing around with high school drama. There's more to this." Nathan, always the skeptic, furrowed his brow. "You're saying Jason's got connections to adults, right? How do we even start to figure that out?" Zara hesitated, taking a deep breath. "I don't know yet, but I think his crew has someone close to him who can help us. Maybe someone who's been forced to work with him, but isn't fully on his side." Emily looked between the two of them. "Are you saying we have to get someone on the inside?" Zara nodded. "We need someone who knows Jason's every move, who knows his people. We can't do this without information. We have to play smart and find a way to use what he's got against him." Nathan shifted uncomfortably. "And what if we're wrong? What if we dig too deep and end up making things worse?" Zara's gaze hardened. "I don't think we have a choice. Jason's not going to stop. The longer we wait, the more dangerous this gets. We need to act now." Emily sighed but nodded. "I agree. But who can we trust?" Zara thought for a moment, her eyes narrowing as an idea began to take shape. "There's someone who might be able to help, Jake. He knows things. And he's been inside that world with Jason before." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Jake? I thought you were already using him. What's the plan now?" Zara's lips curled into a small smile. "Jake isn't just some random guy. He used to be part of Jason's circle. He knows all of Jason's moves, and he's not happy with what he's seen. I think he wants to help, he just doesn't know how yet." Emily glanced at Nathan before looking back at Zara. "So, what? You want to meet with him again?" Zara nodded. "We need to know what Jason is planning next. Jake might be our best shot." The next evening, Zara and her friends met Jake again, this time at a quieter location, a small park at the edge of town. Jake was already there when they arrived, leaning casually against a bench, looking like he belonged to no particular place. His sharp eyes met Zara's as she approached. "You guys are serious about this, huh?" Jake said, his voice low but with a trace of amusement. "I'm starting to think maybe I've got no choice but to help you." Zara took a seat next to him, her voice steady but urgent. "We need to know more about Jason's network, his connections, the people outside of school who are backing him. If we're going to stop him, we need intel. You're the only one who can get it for us. Jake looked down at his shoes for a moment, then back up at Zara. I've already told you. Jason's deeper into this than you think. It's not just about bullying anymore. He's into some serious stuff. Zara leaned forward, desperate. I don't care what he's into. I need to know who he's working with and how we can stop it. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about everyone he's hurting. Jake studied her for a long time before nodding slowly. Okay. I'll help. But we're treading on dangerous ground here. Jason's not going to let this slide. He's going to fight back. Zara's heart pounded in her chest. I'm not scared of him. But I need you to tell me everything you know. Every name, every connection. We're going to take him down. Jake exhaled sharply and ran a hand through his hair. All right. Here's what I know. He went on to explain the complex web Jason had woven over the years. It wasn't just about intimidation or manipulation anymore. Jason was connected to people in places Zara never imagined, adults who had their own reasons for keeping him in power. They didn't care about the petty drama at school, they cared about control, money, and influence. Jason was merely a pawn, but he had learned to play the game better than anyone. Jake named a few of the key figures involved, people who were well beyond Zara's reach, people who knew how to cover their tracks. There were whispers of a business network that Jason had become a part of, though Zara didn't fully understand the details yet. All she knew was that this wasn't just about bullying or reputation anymore. Jason was involved in something far more dangerous, something that involved money, power, and people who could hurt her in ways she couldn't even comprehend. Zara felt a chill run down her spine as Jake continued, but her resolve hardened. So what do we do now? Jake met her gaze with a mix of caution and determination. We gather evidence. We figure out where Jason's power lies, and we take it from him. But you need to be ready for the worst. This isn't going to be easy. Zara nodded. She was ready. Whatever it took, she would stop Jason and take back control of her life. Zara sat in her room that evening, the weight of the conversation with Jake still heavy on her mind. Every detail, every piece of information he'd shared felt like a puzzle she was still trying to piece together. Jason wasn't just a high school bully anymore, he was connected to a world she didn't fully understand. The more she learned, the more dangerous things became. But there was no turning back now. Her phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts. It was a message from Emily, "We need to talk. Meet us tomorrow after school." Zara quickly typed a response. "I'll be there. Got a lot to discuss." As the night wore on, Zara's mind raced. She needed a plan, a solid one. If she was going to take down Jason, she had to be strategic. No more reactive moves. This wasn't about getting revenge, this was about exposing the truth and using it to destroy him before he could do any more damage. But she also knew that the deeper she got, the more at risk she became. Jason's network wasn't just school gossip. It was real, and it was dangerous. The next day at school, Zara tried her best to keep a low profile. But it was impossible to ignore the stares, the whispers, the constant reminders that Jason's vendetta against her was growing stronger. It felt like the whole school was watching, waiting for her to snap, waiting for her to give up. But Zara refused to let them see her sweat. She wasn't going to fall into the trap Jason had set for her. She was smarter than that now. She had a purpose. And she had allies. By the time school ended, Zara rushed to meet Emily and Nathan. They were already waiting at the back of the school, just behind the gym. "All right, let's hear it," Nathan said, crossing his arms and leaning against the brick wall. He looked a little less anxious today, which meant he was ready to take action. Zara took a deep breath. "We need to go on the offensive. I've learned more about Jason's connections. He's not just some petty high school bully anymore. He's connected to adults, people who have their hands in shady businesses. But here's the thing, if we expose his connections, we can take him down. Emily nodded slowly. So, what's the plan? You've been working with Jake. What's next? Zara glanced around to make sure no one was listening. Jake's going to help us dig deeper. He knows more about the people Jason's working with, but we need proof. We need something solid we can show people, something that'll make the school, the cops, or whoever else we need take notice. Nathan raised an eyebrow. Proof? You're thinking about going public with this, right? Zara nodded. Yeah. We can't just confront Jason directly. He's too powerful now. But we can expose him. We can show the truth. And the truth will destroy everything he's built. Emily took a step closer. And how do we get this proof? Zara's eyes hardened with determination. I'm going to get it. I've already started tracking some of Jason's movements, who he's meeting with, where he's going. But I need to be smart about it. We can't afford to make a mistake. Nathan winced. This sounds risky. You're talking about following Jason around, right? What if he catches you? Zara shook her head. I've already thought of that. We need to make sure we're invisible. We need to blend in. If we're going to follow him, we have to stay out of sight. Emily bit her lip, clearly concerned but willing to listen. Okay, but how are we going to keep track of everything? We can't just rely on our phones. What if Jason sees us? Zara smiled, feeling the excitement build inside her. I've got a plan. We'll use the cameras at school. There are security cameras everywhere. We'll be able to track his movements without ever having to leave our seats. Nathan's eyes lit up. That's brilliant. We can use the footage to pinpoint where he's going and who he's meeting. If we can catch something on camera, that's our proof. Zara nodded. Exactly. And if we get it right, Jason won't know what hit him. We'll have everything we need to expose him and his whole network. Emily hesitated, clearly thinking it over. Okay. I'm in. But what happens if we do catch something? What's our next move? Zara's eyes gleamed. We go public. We take the footage and the evidence to the right people. We get the authorities involved. And we make sure everyone knows who Jason really is. Nathan clapped his hands together. I'm in. Let's do this. But be careful, Zara. This is way bigger than just school drama. Zara's heart raced as she looked between her friends. This was the moment where everything would change. She had the power to take Jason down, but only if she stayed ahead of him. She couldn't afford to slip up. She had one shot at this, and she wasn't going to let it slip through her fingers. I'm ready, Zara said, her voice steady. We're doing this together. No turning back. As the three of them made their way to the parking lot, Zara felt a surge of adrenaline. They were about to dig into something far bigger than they could have ever imagined. The stakes were higher than ever, and the risks were greater. But Zara wasn't afraid anymore. She had a mission, a purpose, and the support of her friends. Jason thought he had everything under control. He thought he could intimidate her, break her spirit. But Zara was ready to prove him wrong. She wasn't just going to fight back, she was going to win. The next few days were a blur of activity for Zara and her friends. They had a plan now, and that plan was both exhilarating and terrifying. Zara's mind raced with the thought of all the pieces that needed to fall into place. She was about to take on something much larger than she ever anticipated, but she couldn't stop now. There was no turning back. After school the next day, the group gathered again, this time in the library. It was quieter there, a place where they could discuss their next moves without being interrupted. Zara sat at a table near the back, her laptop open in front of her. She had already started to sift through security footage from various cameras around the school, tracking Jason's every move. There was a method to her madness now. She was gathering data, looking for patterns. Jason wasn't acting alone, and Zara knew the key to exposing him lay in these tiny, unnoticed moments. Emily and Nathan were both beside her, watching the screens with intense concentration. They hadn't seen this side of Zara before, but they could feel her determination pulsing through the air. This wasn't just about school bullying anymore. This was war. There. Emily pointed at the screen, her finger tracing the image of Jason slipping out the side door of the gym, speaking to a man who looked far too old to be a student. Zara paused the footage, her fingers hovering over the mouse. "Who is that?" Nathan asked, his voice low and cautious. Zara zoomed in on the man's face, trying to make out his features. He was tall, well-built, with a sharp jawline and a hardened look in his eyes. His face wasn't familiar, but his presence screamed danger. "I don't know," Zara muttered, her brow furrowing. "But I'm going to find out." The trio spent the next hour meticulously combing through more footage, finding more instances of Jason meeting with this mysterious man and other adults. Jason's meetings were always quick, just a few minutes behind closed doors or in the parking lot, but the man was always with him. There was something about the way Jason acted around him that felt different. He wasn't just talking to a friend, he was talking to someone who had power. Finally, Zara leaned back in her chair, rubbing her eyes in frustration. "We need to know who this guy is. I'm sure he's connected to whatever Jason's doing." Emily sighed, staring at the screen. "How do we get that information? We don't even know his name." Nathan shifted uncomfortably. "We could ask around, maybe dig into his background through social media or talk to people who might know him." Zara's lips curved into a slight smile. "Exactly. But we need to be careful. We can't let Jason catch wind of what we're doing." There was a pause as all of them took in the gravity of the situation. They weren't just gathering information anymore, they were taking risks. This wasn't a school project or a silly prank, this was real life, and their lives were now intertwined with Jason's dark world. "I'll start digging," Zara said decisively. "I've got a few ideas on where to find some answers. But we need to keep this quiet. If Jason figures out what we're doing, we're screwed." The next afternoon, Zara set out on her mission alone. She had a few people in mind who might know more about the mysterious man and his connection to Jason. She decided to start with the school staff. A few teachers and administrators knew a lot about the students' families and social circles. Zara figured that if anyone would know something about Jason's mysterious adult friends, it would be them. Her first stop was the teacher's lounge. Zara had done her homework and knew that Mrs. Lawson, a history teacher, often stayed late to grade papers. Mrs. Lawson was known for being friendly and a bit of a gossip. Zara wasn't exactly above using that to her advantage. As she walked into the lounge, Mrs. Lawson was seated at a table near the back, flipping through a stack of papers. When she saw Zara, she smiled warmly. "Oh, Zara. What can I do for you?" Zara casually walked over and sat down across from her. "Just needed to ask you a quick question. I've been hearing some things about a man who's been around the school. Not one of the students, but someone who's been meeting with Jason Reynolds. Do you know anything about him?" Mrs. Lawson's smile faltered slightly, but she quickly masked it. "I'm not sure who you're talking about, Zara. Jason is a bit of a mystery himself, don't you think?" She chuckled awkwardly, trying to cover up her discomfort. Zara leaned forward, her eyes locked on the teacher's. "I just want to know who he is. If you don't know anything, that's fine. But I'm pretty sure you've seen him around. He's always with Jason." Mrs. Lawson shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable. For a moment, Zara thought she was going to shut down the conversation, but then the teacher sighed and looked around the room as if making sure no one was listening. "I don't know his name, Mrs. Lawson whispered, lowering her voice. But I've seen him around. I know he's connected to some people in town. I'm not sure what they do, but I've heard rumors. She looked at Zara cautiously. I've heard they're into things, business dealings, shady stuff. You'd be better off staying away from them. Zara's pulse quickened. Business dealings? What kind of business? Mrs. Lawson shook her head. I can't say. You should talk to someone else if you really want to know. I don't want to get involved in something I don't understand. But be careful, Zara. People like that don't play by the rules. Zara's heart pounded in her chest. She had just gotten her first real lead. Thanks for the info, Zara said quickly, standing up and gathering her things. I'll be careful. As she walked out of the lounge, her mind raced. This was bigger than she thought. Jason wasn't just involved with a few shady people, he was tied to a larger web of illicit activity. And now Zara was officially tangled in it, too. The game had changed. Zara couldn't shake the feeling that everything was spiraling out of control. Every time she uncovered a new piece of information, the pieces of the puzzle only led to more questions. Jason's world was bigger, darker, and far more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. But she wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. After leaving Mrs. Lawson's, Zara walked through the hallways with a new sense of urgency. She had to follow this lead, and she had to do it carefully. She had learned more than she ever thought she would about Jason's connections, but it still wasn't enough. She needed more to bring him down. It was time to take a bigger risk. That evening, Zara met with Emily and Nathan again. They were sitting in the same quiet corner of the library, all of them with their heads buried in their phones and laptops. But this time, Zara had more to say. I spoke to Mrs. Lawson today, Zara started, her voice low. She glanced around to make sure no one was eavesdropping. She said that Jason's been meeting with some pretty shady people, and that they're connected to some kind of business dealings. She didn't know much more than that, but it's a start. Emily leaned forward, her expression serious. Business dealings? What kind of business? Zara shook her head. She wouldn't say. But there's definitely more going on here than we thought. And it's not just some high school drama. This is bigger than Jason. Nathan frowned, his arms crossed. You think this is tied to something illegal? Because if it is, we're walking on thin ice. Zara nodded, her eyes intense. I don't know yet. But I need to find out. We can't just keep guessing. I've been thinking about this all day, and there's one person who might know more. He's a reporter who works at the local paper. His name's Luke Harris. I've seen him around school a few times, and he seems to know a lot about the town's politics and business deals. I'm going to talk to him. Emily and Nathan exchanged uneasy looks, but neither of them said anything. They knew how far Zara had already gone for this cause, and they understood that there was no stopping her now. They just had to trust that she knew what she was doing. Are you sure about this? Nathan asked, his voice laced with concern. Zara took a deep breath, her determination unwavering. I have to be. If I don't find out who's pulling Jason's strings, we're never going to stop him. I'm going to meet Luke tomorrow after school. I'm sure he has information that can lead us to the truth. The tension in the room thickened as they sat in silence for a few moments. Zara couldn't blame them for being nervous. This was getting far too close to the dangerous edge they had all been trying to avoid. After a while, Emily broke the silence. All right. If you're going to do this, we're with you. But we need to stay smart. No more impulsive moves. Zara nodded, grateful for her friend's support. I know. This time, we do it the right way. The next afternoon, after school, Zara found herself standing outside the local cafe where she was supposed to meet Luke Harris. She had a mixture of excitement and anxiety swirling in her stomach. This was the opportunity she needed, but it also felt like she was walking into a trap. What if Luke didn't trust her? What if he had his own agenda? She shook off the thoughts as she pushed open the door and entered the small, cozy cafe. Luke was sitting at a corner table, his laptop open in front of him and a coffee cup in hand. He looked up as Zara approached, offering her a small smile. "Zara, right?" he asked, his voice friendly but guarded. "Yeah, that's me," she said, sitting down across from him. She offered him a tight smile, trying to mask the nervousness she felt. Luke took a sip from his coffee, then set the cup down carefully. "So, what's this all about? You said you had some questions about Jason Reynolds." Zara leaned in, lowering her voice so no one could overhear. "It's not just about Jason anymore. I think there's something bigger going on, something dangerous. I need to know who Jason is connected to, and I think you might be able to help." Luke raised an eyebrow. "Bigger than just high school drama, huh?" "Well, you're right about one thing, Jason isn't just some typical kid. He's got connections. But you're treading dangerous waters if you're trying to dig into that." Zara didn't flinch. "I'm not afraid of danger. I just want to know the truth. Who is he working with? What's going on behind the scenes?" Luke paused for a moment, studying her carefully. "All right, I'll tell you what I know. Jason's not just some kid who likes to throw his weight around. His family's been involved in some sketchy stuff for years, money laundering, shady real estate deals. But the real question is who they're doing it with. And I'll be honest, I don't have all the answers. But I've heard rumors about a few names, people who don't mess around." Zara felt her pulse quicken. This was it. The more she heard, the closer she was to bringing everything into the light. "Who are they? I need names." Luke leaned back in his chair, his eyes scanning the room before locking onto hers. "There's a man named David Montgomery. He's been in and out of the town for years, always involved in something shady. I don't know if Jason's directly involved with him, but he's been seen with him a lot lately. Montgomery's got his fingers in everything, construction, land deals, and even some dealings that are, let's just say, not legal." Zara's heart hammered in her chest. She had her lead. Montgomery was the key. "Thanks, Luke. You don't know how much this means." Luke shook his head. "Be careful, Zara. These people don't play by the rules. If you dig too deep, you'll regret it." Zara stood up, determination in her eyes. "I'm not scared of them." As she left the cafe, Zara couldn't help but feel a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She was closer than ever to uncovering the truth. But she also knew that the deeper she went, the more dangerous things would become. There was no turning back now. Jason Reynolds was about to find out that Zara wasn't someone he could push around. She was going to bring him down, one way or another. The following days passed in a blur of urgency. Zara couldn't afford to waste any more time. She had a name, David Montgomery, and a whole new set of questions that burned in her mind. Who was he? What was his connection to Jason? And most importantly, what kind of power did he wield over Jason and his group of loyal followers? Zara's heart raced as she sat in her room, surrounded by papers, open laptops, and a growing list of leads. The more she uncovered, the clearer it became, Jason wasn't just some arrogant bully. He was a pawn in a much larger game. And the man pulling the strings, David Montgomery, was someone Zara needed to confront. But before taking the plunge, Zara knew she needed more information. The only way to truly take down Montgomery and, by extension, Jason, was to understand his entire operation. She needed to get closer to him, closer than she ever thought possible. That afternoon, Zara met with Emily and Nathan again, their usual spot in the library now a familiar headquarters for their investigation. They gathered around the same table, and Zara dropped a folder onto it with a heavy thud. "I found Montgomery," Zara said, her voice low but firm. "And I think I know how we can get to him." Emily leaned forward, her eyes widening. "Wait, you found him? How?" Zara nodded, pulling out a few printed pages from the folder. "His name has popped up in some local property deals, land, construction projects. There's one in particular he's involved in, a new luxury condo development near downtown. I think it's a front for something bigger." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "That's a pretty risky move. People like Montgomery don't usually leave that kind of trail behind. Are you sure this is the right lead?" Zara's fingers tapped anxiously on the table. "I'm sure. I've been digging through the public records, and Montgomery's name is tied to the company behind the condo project. It's all been under the radar, but it's something." Emily frowned, her mind processing the information. "So, what's the plan? We can't exactly just walk into a construction site and start asking questions. He's probably got security or even lawyers looking out for him." Zara's lips curved into a determined smile. "We're not just walking into the site. We're going to use their own system against them." Both Emily and Nathan exchanged uncertain glances, but Zara didn't wait for them to catch up. She had already thought this through. "I've found the name of someone who works at the construction site, someone who has been there since the start. His name is Mark Lawson, and he's got connections to the people Montgomery works with. I'll reach out to him. If he knows what's really going on, he's our way in." Nathan looked impressed but skeptical. "You're going to contact someone who works for Montgomery? What if he's part of it? What if he's just as dangerous?" Zara looked at Nathan, her gaze unwavering. "I don't think he is. He's just a worker, and from what I've seen, he's gotten fed up with Montgomery and the way he treats people. I think he'll talk to me." Emily nodded, though she still looked a bit uncertain. "All right, we're in. But let's be careful. If we're dealing with someone like Montgomery, we need to be prepared for anything." Zara stood up, feeling the weight of her decision pressing down on her. "I know. But this is the only way to get to him. We don't have time to waste." Later that evening, Zara sat in front of her computer, composing a message to Mark Lawson. She had found his contact details through an online forum linked to the construction project, and though it felt risky, she couldn't afford to second-guess herself. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before she typed. "Hi Mark. I know this is probably going to sound strange, but I need your help. I've been doing some research on the construction project you're working on, and I believe there's more going on than meets the eye. I'm not sure who to trust, but I've heard that you might have some insight into what's really happening at the site. If you're willing to talk, please reach out. I'm hoping you can help me uncover the truth. Zara." She hit send, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no idea how he would respond, or if he would respond at all. The only thing she knew was that she had to take this chance. The next morning, Zara woke up to a notification on her phone. Mark Lawson had replied. "Zara. You're right. There's more going on here than just a luxury condo project. I'll meet with you today after work. I can't talk here, but I'll give you the information you need. I'm done with Montgomery's games." Zara's breath caught in her throat. This was it, the breakthrough she needed. She quickly typed a response. "Thank you. I'll be there. Where do you want to meet?" He replied almost instantly. "The diner on Maple Street. 6:30 p.m. Don't bring anyone else. It's too dangerous." Zara quickly closed her phone, her mind racing. She hadn't expected him to respond so quickly. The fact that he wanted to meet in person made it all the more urgent. This wasn't just a casual conversation, this was a chance to uncover the truth behind Montgomery's operation, and Jason's involvement in it. That evening, Zara arrived at the diner on Maple Street, her heart beating faster with each step. The small, dimly lit restaurant was practically empty at this hour. Zara scanned the room and found Mark sitting at a booth in the far corner. He looked ordinary, just a man in his mid-30s with short brown hair and a tired expression. But there was something in his eyes that told Zara he wasn't just another worker. He had seen too much. She walked over to the booth and sat down across from him. He didn't waste any time. "Zara, I'm glad you reached out," Mark said quietly. "But you have to understand, this is dangerous. Montgomery's not just a businessman. He's involved in stuff that would get you hurt if you're not careful." Zara leaned forward, her voice steady. "I'm not afraid. I just need to know the truth. What's Montgomery involved in? What's his connection to Jason?" Mark hesitated, looking around the diner nervously. "Jason's just a kid. But Montgomery's been using him. He's been running a protection racket through the construction sites, threatening workers, taking cuts from the deals, forcing people to do things they don't want to do. And Jason? He's part of it. He's the one who collects the money, intimidates people, and makes sure no one steps out of line." Zara's stomach twisted as the pieces fell into place. So Jason's been working for Montgomery all along. He's not just some bully, he's part of an organized crime ring. Mark nodded, his voice low and grim. "Exactly. And if you're not careful, Zara, you could get caught up in this too. Montgomery won't hesitate to make you disappear if you start digging too deep." Zara felt a chill run down her spine, but she didn't flinch. "I'm not going to back down." Mark looked at her with a mix of admiration and fear. "I hope you know what you're doing." Zara nodded. The truth was finally out in the open, and now she had a choice to make: take down Montgomery, expose Jason's involvement, and risk everything, or turn away, live in fear, and let the darkness continue. There was only one answer in Zara's mind. The following days were a blur of sleepless nights, adrenaline, and fear. Zara couldn't ignore the cold pit in her stomach every time she thought about David Montgomery. Mark's words echoed in her head: "Montgomery won't hesitate to make you disappear." But Zara wasn't about to let fear stop her now. She had gone too far, uncovered too much. This was bigger than her. This was about stopping Jason, and bringing down the network of corruption that he was part of. Zara met Emily and Nathan in their usual corner of the library. The room felt quieter than usual, the weight of their task hanging heavily in the air. Zara sat down with a determined look on her face, already knowing what she had to do next. "We need to get to Montgomery," Zara said, her voice hushed but firm. "I have enough to know that Jason's just a puppet in his game. I want to confront Montgomery directly." Emily's eyes widened. "Zara, this is getting really serious. We've already risked a lot. What if we push too far?" Zara shook her head. "If we don't stop him now, it's only going to get worse. I've been digging, and I know Montgomery's behind everything. He's been using Jason to run a protection racket, threatening people, making money off their misery. I can't just sit back and let it happen. We need to expose him." Nathan looked concerned, running a hand through his hair. "You're sure about this? Going after Montgomery? He's not some high school bully, this is a dangerous guy we're talking about." Zara nodded resolutely. "I know. But we have to keep pushing. I've talked to Mark Lawson. He confirmed everything. Jason's deep in this mess. We're not going to stop until we have everything. We need to expose Montgomery, show the town what he's really doing." Emily's expression softened with concern, but she also understood. She knew there was no stopping Zara now. "All right. We're in. But we do this smart. We have to be careful." Zara's heart raced as she realized that there was no turning back. She had made up her mind. This wasn't just about standing up to Jason anymore. It was about taking down a powerful man who had used fear and intimidation to control people for too long. That evening, Zara stayed up late, poring over documents she had managed to dig up. The more she found, the more horrifying it became. Montgomery wasn't just running a protection racket. He was involved in illegal construction contracts, bribery, and even money laundering. The scale of his operation was terrifying. And Jason? Jason had become the face of it. His connections to Montgomery had deepened over the years, with the older man using him to get close to the people who worked for him. He had become a tool, just like everyone else. As Zara stared at the papers spread across her desk, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Mark Lawson. "You need to be careful. Montgomery's getting suspicious. I overheard him talking about a group of kids looking into his business. They know about Jason, and they know about the construction project. I don't know if it's you, but I think they're onto something. Be careful. Don't trust anyone." Zara's pulse quickened. This was it. Montgomery knew they were getting too close. There was no turning back now. The warning was clear, they had to move fast. The next day at school felt different. There was a sense of tension in the air, as if everyone knew something was about to happen. Jason had been acting strangely for the past few days, quiet, withdrawn, his usual swagger replaced by a kind of nervous energy. Zara couldn't help but wonder if Montgomery was already pushing him harder. She kept her distance, watching him closely from afar. As much as she hated the idea, Jason was a piece of the puzzle she still needed to figure out. If she could get him to talk, get him to see the truth, maybe she could shake the hold Montgomery had over him. But Zara knew that wouldn't be easy. At lunch, Emily and Nathan found her sitting alone at their usual table. Emily gave her a concerned look. "Are you all right? You seem off," Emily said, glancing at Zara with a knowing gaze. Zara shook her head, trying to push the feelings of dread aside. "I'm fine. It's just everything. Montgomery's dangerous. I've never felt more afraid in my life. But we're not stopping. Not now. Not after everything we've uncovered." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "You're sure about this? Confronting Montgomery is one thing, but Jason? He's not the one calling the shots here. Montgomery is." Zara thought for a moment, then nodded. "I have to confront Jason. If I can get him to see what's really going on, maybe we can turn him. He doesn't have to be Montgomery's puppet. Maybe he doesn't even realize how deep he's in." Emily looked uneasy. "Zara, be careful. Jason might be the one with the influence, but Montgomery's the one with the power." Zara gave her a grim smile. "I know. But if we don't at least try, we'll never know. Jason's not the enemy, Montgomery is." Nathan sighed but didn't argue. "All right. Let's do this carefully." That afternoon, after school, Zara found Jason standing near the back of the school, his back to the wall, eyes scanning the parking lot. She hesitated for a moment but then walked up to him. "Jason," she called softly. He turned quickly, eyes narrowing as he saw her. "What do you want, Zara?" His voice was cold, defensive. Zara took a deep breath, her heart racing as she approached. "I want to talk. About Montgomery. About everything." Jason stiffened. "I don't know what you're talking about." Zara pushed forward. "Don't lie. I know everything, Jason. You're part of something far bigger than just high school drama. And I know you're scared. I can see it. But this is your chance to walk away before it's too late." Jason scoffed, running a hand through his hair. "You think you can just walk in here and change everything? It's not that simple, Zara. You have no idea what you're dealing with." Zara's voice softened, but her eyes were filled with determination. "I do. And I can help you. You don't have to be a part of his game anymore. You don't have to keep doing his bidding. There's a way out." For a moment, Jason's eyes flickered with something, doubt, fear. But then he clenched his jaw and turned away. I'm not talking to you about this. You don't know anything. Zara stood her ground. I know everything I need to. If you won't talk to me, I'll go to Montgomery myself. Jason froze. His shoulders tensed, and for a moment, he looked like he might turn around. But he didn't. Instead, he muttered, "You don't get it, Zara. You're already too deep in this." Zara watched him walk away, frustration boiling inside her. But she wasn't giving up. Not now. She had a name. She had a face. She had the truth. Now it was time to take the next step, whether Jason was ready to face it or not. Zara spent the next few days on edge, every moment of her time consumed by thoughts of Montgomery, Jason, and the rapidly closing net around them. The pressure was mounting. The more she uncovered, the deeper she fell into a world she couldn't escape. But Zara refused to back down. She had come this far, and she wasn't going to let fear or uncertainty stop her now. Emily and Nathan had been supportive, but even they could feel the weight of the situation. Every time Zara brought up Montgomery's name, they shared concerned glances, their apprehension growing. The stakes were high, and the tension between them all was palpable. But there was no time for second thoughts. Zara needed to act fast, and the only way to make Montgomery listen was to take direct action. The following Tuesday, Zara met Mark Lawson again. He had insisted on meeting her in a small, dimly lit cafe on the outskirts of town, a place where people wouldn't recognize him. Mark was jumpy as usual, looking over his shoulder every few seconds as if he feared someone was following him. His eyes were filled with the same fear he'd shown when they first spoke, but today there was something else, determination. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" Mark asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He leaned forward, his face tense. "You're really going to go after Montgomery?" Zara nodded, her expression hardening. "I don't have a choice. He's ruined too many lives. Jason included. I can't let him get away with it." Mark shifted uncomfortably, his hands fidgeting with the napkin in front of him. "You don't understand. Montgomery isn't someone you just confront. The man is dangerous, and you're walking straight into his territory. You think Jason's bad? Montgomery is a whole different level. He has connections everywhere, people who will do anything to protect him. You can't just waltz in and expose him like that." Zara's gaze was unwavering. "I'm not afraid. I'll do whatever it takes." Mark's expression softened, but his voice remained cautious. "All right. If you're set on this, I'll help you. But you need to understand that it's not just Montgomery you'll be going after. You'll be taking down an entire network. A web of people who have all been making money off of others' misery. If you go through with this, there's no turning back. Once you're in for good." Zara didn't flinch. She had come too far to back out now. "I know the risks. I've seen enough to know this goes way beyond just Jason. But I can't let him continue to manipulate people." Mark sighed, looking resigned. "I'll give you what I know, but I'm warning you, if Montgomery comes after you, there's no one who can stop him. Not even me." Zara nodded, grateful for his help but resolute in her decision. "I appreciate it. But we're doing this. We're going to take him down." Mark took a deep breath and leaned in closer, lowering his voice even further. "All right, I'm going to tell you everything I know. You're going to need a plan. You need to get in close to Montgomery, see where he's weakest. Find out who's working for him, who's pulling the strings behind the scenes. He doesn't make a move without a reason. The more you know, the better your chances of getting out of this alive." The information Mark gave her was a game changer. He outlined the various people Montgomery had working for him, from the low-level enforcers to the higher-ups who handled the money and logistics of the operation. The most important piece of information, however, was about a private meeting Montgomery was scheduled to have in 2 weeks. A major business deal was going down, one that would give Montgomery access to even more power. This was it. The window of opportunity she needed. 2 weeks, Zara whispered to herself as she stared at the notes Mark had given her. That's when we strike. As Zara's plan began to take shape, she met with Emily and Nathan to fill them in on the details. The weight of their decision was becoming more real with each passing day. This is insane, Zara, Emily said, shaking her head in disbelief. You're really going to go after Montgomery? Do you realize how much danger you're in? Zara met Emily's gaze and stood firm. I realize the danger. But it's now or never. We can't wait any longer. I've got a shot at this, at exposing everything. But I need you both to help me. Nathan crossed his arms, his expression conflicted. What exactly do you need us to do? This isn't something we can just jump into without thinking it through. Zara's voice softened. I need you to help me gather information. We can't just barge into Montgomery's world without knowing everything there is to know. I need you two to dig deeper, find out who else is involved. Who's backing him? If we're going to take him down, we need to know everything. Emily hesitated but then nodded. All right. We'll help. But you have to promise me something. Zara raised an eyebrow. What? Emily's expression was serious. Promise me you won't do anything crazy. Promise me you'll be careful. Zara smiled, a small, tight smile. I promise. But we're doing this. I'm not going to let Montgomery get away with it. With the plan in motion, the next 2 weeks felt like a whirlwind of preparation. Zara, Emily, and Nathan worked tirelessly, gathering as much information as they could on Montgomery and his associates. They dug through old news articles, financial records, and anything that could give them an edge. Meanwhile, Zara stayed in constant contact with Mark, who provided her with additional insights into Montgomery's operation. But with each piece of the puzzle they uncovered, the more dangerous it became. Montgomery wasn't just some local businessman. He had connections that stretched far beyond their small town. Powerful people. Dangerous people. Zara couldn't ignore the feeling that they were being watched, that they were walking a razor's edge. And every time she looked over her shoulder, she couldn't shake the feeling that Montgomery's influence was closing in on them. The night before their plan was set to unfold, Zara stood alone in her room, staring out the window at the quiet street below. The weight of the decision pressed heavily on her chest. The next day, she would confront Montgomery head-on. It was a gamble. But for the first time in a long while, Zara felt the fire of determination burning within her. She couldn't stop now. Too many lives were at stake. Tomorrow, we make our move, she whispered to herself, her hands clenched into fists. The night passed in a blur of anxious thoughts and restless sleep. Zara lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through the countless scenarios that could play out tomorrow. The plan was in motion, and the stakes had never been higher. One misstep could mean disaster. When the morning finally came, Zara woke up with a sense of purpose. The weight of what she was about to do hung heavily on her shoulders, but it was too late to back down now. She'd already come too far. Emily and Nathan were waiting for her at school, their faces drawn and tense. They hadn't said much the night before, each of them lost in their own thoughts about what the coming day would bring. But today, the reality of the situation had set in. You ready for this? Nathan asked quietly as Zara approached their usual table in the cafeteria. Zara gave him a tight-lipped smile. As ready as I'll ever be. Emily frowned, her eyes searching Zara's face for any sign of doubt. I still think you should be careful. Montgomery has people everywhere. He'll know if we make one wrong move. Zara's gaze hardened, her resolve strengthening. I've thought this through. I'm not going in blind. We've got all the intel we need. Now we just have to execute. We'll gather more evidence, get inside his operation, and make sure it's enough to bring him down. Once and for all. Emily sighed but nodded. I don't want anything to happen to you, Zara. Zara's heart softened at the concern in her friend's voice, but she shook it off. Nothing is going to happen. We're doing this for a reason. And when it's over, things will change. For all of us. The day passed in a haze of preparation. Zara, Emily, and Nathan moved like shadows, covering their tracks and making sure everything was in place for the night ahead. The tension was thick, palpable in every conversation, every glance they shared. They were on the edge of something huge, something that could change their lives forever, whether they succeeded or failed. By late afternoon, Zara made her way to the agreed-upon location, an old warehouse near the edge of town. Mark had given her the details. Montgomery's private meeting with several of his associates was set to take place there that evening. It was their best shot at getting concrete evidence and exposing the man who had pulled the strings behind the scenes for so long. Zara's pulse quickened as she approached the warehouse, her steps cautious but determined. She could hear her heart pounding in her chest, but she pushed the fear aside. There was no turning back now. Emily and Nathan were parked a few blocks away, ready to assist from a safe distance. Zara had insisted on going in alone. The fewer people involved, the less risk there would be of getting caught. As Zara neared the entrance, she scanned the area for any sign of movement. The warehouse was dark, the lights inside casting faint shadows through the cracked windows. She could see the faint outline of several figures moving inside, Montgomery and his associates, no doubt. Taking a deep breath, Zara slipped into the shadows, moving silently toward the back of the building. Her mind raced with the details Mark had shared with her. The most important thing was to gather evidence, photographs, recordings, anything that could tie Montgomery to the illegal activities that had been going on under his watch. She had to be careful. One wrong move, and everything could fall apart. Zara found a small window at the back of the warehouse. Crouching low, she peered inside, her breath catching in her throat as she saw Montgomery, flanked by several men in suits. They were gathered around a table, their voices low but urgent. Zara's eyes flicked over to a nearby stack of boxes. There was a faint glow of a laptop screen coming from behind the crates, likely where the business transactions were taking place. This was the moment. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, setting it to record as quietly as she could. Then, she crept closer, moving behind the boxes where she could get a better angle. The men inside were too focused on their conversation to notice her presence. We need to finalize the deal, one of the men said, his voice rough. If we don't get the next shipment on schedule, the whole operation will collapse. Montgomery's counting on us to make this work. Zara's pulse quickened. She had what she needed. This was the evidence she had been searching for. For the next few minutes, Zara carefully documented every word she heard, recording the transaction details and the names of the people involved. The deeper she listened, the more horrifying it became. They were talking about money laundering, illegal construction deals, and bribes that had been paid to keep everything under wraps. Zara's fingers trembled as she typed quick notes on her phone. This was it, the breakthrough she needed. But then, a chilling thought crossed her mind. What if Montgomery knew she was here? Suddenly, the door to the warehouse creaked open. Zara froze, her heart stopping in her chest. She ducked behind the crates, praying she hadn't been seen. Footsteps approached, then stopped just inches away from where Zara was hiding. She held her breath, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Her phone was still recording, but she couldn't risk moving. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps faded away. Zara slowly exhaled, letting the tension drain from her body. She had made it. For now. But this wasn't over. She still had to get out, and that wasn't going to be easy. Zara's heart raced as she carefully made her way toward the exit. She was nearly at the door when she heard voices again, much closer this time. She stopped in her tracks, her mind racing. Montgomery's voice was unmistakable. "We've been compromised. There's someone out there. Find them." Her stomach dropped. It was happening. They knew someone was there. Zara's hands shook as she backed away, her eyes darting around for an escape route. She turned sharply, ducking into a narrow side alley just outside the warehouse. Her mind raced with every step. She had to get back to Emily and Nathan. She had to get the footage to them. But as she ran, a sudden, sharp sound echoed behind her, a shout. The chase had begun. Zara's breath was ragged as she sprinted down the alley, heart pounding. She could hear footsteps gaining on her, the sound of boots slamming against the pavement. She didn't dare look back. She had to make it to the car, had to make it out of there alive. The warehouse loomed behind her, its shadow stretching long in the fading light. She could hear the shouts growing closer, feel the heat of the pursuit pressing down on her. With everything she had, Zara pushed herself faster. The car was only a few more blocks away. She could do this. She had to. Zara's legs burned as she pushed herself harder, the alleyway stretching out before her like an endless blur. She could hear the pounding of boots, the unmistakable sound of someone hot on her heels. She didn't dare look back, every second mattered. She had to get to the car. Her mind raced, trying to calculate her next move. The footage. The evidence. It had to make it out. She couldn't let it fall into Montgomery's hands. Keep running, she told herself, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. You've got this. Don't stop. But the footsteps behind her were growing louder, closer. She could almost feel the air shift as someone surged forward, gaining on her with every step. The streetlights overhead flickered dimly, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. Zara could see the main road in the distance, where the safety of her car waited. She rounded the corner, her pulse racing, only to skid to a stop when she came face to face with two men blocking the street. Their faces were hard, their expressions grim. Zara's heart dropped. She froze for a split second, caught between the impossible choice of trying to slip past them or turning back toward the alley. You can't outrun us, girl, one of the men sneered. His voice was cold, menacing. You've got nowhere to go. Zara's brain was running a mile a minute. She could feel the fear creeping in, but she shoved it aside, focusing instead on her options. She wasn't going down without a fight. Not after everything she'd sacrificed to get this far. Without warning, Zara turned and bolted in the opposite direction, her feet pounding the pavement as she scrambled to find a way out. She heard the men shout in pursuit, but she wasn't going to stop. She wouldn't let them catch her. As she darted down a narrow side street, she noticed a small park ahead. It wasn't much, just a patch of grass and a few benches, but it would provide cover. She could lose them there. Zara's chest burned with the effort, but she kept her head down, focusing on the path ahead. She reached the park in a matter of seconds, barely slowing as she ducked behind a row of tall bushes. Zara pressed herself against the cool stone of a nearby bench, trying to quiet her breathing, trying to remain as still as possible. She dared not move a muscle. The sound of footsteps grew closer again. She could hear the men cursing, their voices just a few feet away, but Zara kept herself hidden. Every second felt like an eternity. The adrenaline coursing through her veins was the only thing keeping her from panicking. Minutes passed in silence, though it felt like an hour. Finally, she heard the sound of footsteps moving further away, the men apparently deciding to give up the search. Zara's shoulders slumped with relief. She wasn't caught, not yet. But she couldn't stay here. Not with the footage still in her pocket. She had to get back to Emily and Nathan. With trembling hands, Zara pulled out her phone and quickly texted them, "I'm safe, for now. I'll explain later. Meet me at the old diner. ASAP." She stood, moving as quickly and quietly as possible through the park, her eyes constantly scanning the surroundings for any sign of danger. Every car that passed felt like a threat. Every person in the street was a potential danger. But she couldn't afford to be paranoid, not now. She was so close. Zara arrived at the diner a short while later, her legs aching from the run but her determination still strong. She spotted Emily and Nathan sitting at a corner booth, their faces etched with concern. They immediately stood as Zara approached, relief flooding their expressions as they saw her unharmed. "You made it," Nathan breathed, his voice tight with anxiety. Zara gave him a strained smile, sliding into the booth beside them. "Yeah, but I didn't exactly get out clean." Emily leaned forward, her eyes scanning Zara's face. "What happened? We were starting to get worried when you didn't text back." Zara took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. She was exhausted, both physically and mentally, but the adrenaline kept her moving. She pulled out her phone, showing them the recording she'd made earlier. "I got the footage," Zara said, her voice low. "Everything we need to bring Montgomery down." Emily and Nathan both leaned in to watch the video, their expressions hardening as the gravity of what Zara had uncovered hit them. The illegal activities, the shady business deals, the money laundering, it was all there, in black and white. The proof they needed to expose Montgomery for who he really was. "This is huge," Emily whispered, her voice thick with disbelief. "This could bring him down for good." Nathan nodded, his face grim. "But we have to be careful. He knows someone's been snooping around. He's not going to take this lightly. If he finds out you have this footage." Zara cut him off. "I know. But it's our best shot. We can't waste any more time." They all sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling over them like a thick fog. Zara's phone buzzed in her pocket, and she quickly checked it. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw the text. "It's not over yet. We know who you are. You won't get away with this. M." Zara's hand shook as she read the message. Montgomery had found out. She looked up at Emily and Nathan, her face steely with determination. "This isn't just about me anymore. It's about all of us. We can't stop now." Emily and Nathan nodded, their resolve matching Zara's. As they discussed their next steps, the reality of what they were facing hit home even harder. Montgomery wasn't just a local businessman, he was part of something much bigger. If they wanted to bring him down, they had to go all in. No more half measures. No more fear. Zara's hand tightened around her phone. "Tomorrow," she said, her voice unwavering. "We take this to the authorities. We make sure Montgomery's empire falls, and we make sure no one else gets hurt." The road ahead would be dangerous, but Zara knew there was no turning back now. The storm was coming, and it was time to face it head-on. The next few hours felt like a blur of activity. The tension was thick in the air, and Zara could feel it in every part of her body. The final stage of their plan was unfolding, and everything they had worked for was about to come to a head. There was no going back. Zara sat at the table in the old diner, surrounded by Emily and Nathan, who were carefully going over their plan one more time. The message from Montgomery still hung over her like a dark cloud, its warning a constant reminder of the danger they were all in. "We have to act fast," Nathan said, his voice steady but with a hard edge. "We don't know how long Montgomery will let us breathe before he comes after us. We have the evidence. Now we need to make sure it's seen." Zara nodded, her fingers tapping rhythmically on the table. "We give the footage to the police. We can't waste any more time hiding. Montgomery will come after us regardless. If we're going down, we might as well go down fighting." Emily leaned forward, her expression serious. "But what if he's already got someone inside the police? What if this whole thing is compromised?" Zara's gaze sharpened. She had thought about that. It was a real possibility. But they had to take the risk. Then we go public. We release it to the press, make it impossible for him to cover up. He's not going to expect us to fight back this hard. Nathan sighed, rubbing his temples. You're right. We've come too far. But once we hand this over, there's no turning back. It'll be all-out war. Zara met his gaze. I know. And I'm ready. We're ready. The plan was set. The three of them would head to the police station, where Zara would hand over the footage. They had to be careful, there were too many variables at play. If Montgomery had spies watching, they would need to act fast and be smart. They left the diner and drove in silence, each lost in their thoughts. The streets of the city were quiet, the usual bustle of the afternoon muted under the weight of what they were about to do. Zara could feel her pulse pounding in her ears, but she refused to let the fear take over. They had come too far to back down now. As they arrived at the police station, Zara's stomach twisted in knots. This was the moment. She had the evidence, but would it be enough to bring Montgomery to justice? She wasn't sure, but she had to try. The three of them stepped out of the car and approached the entrance. The building loomed over them, its windows dark and uninviting. Zara took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Emily and Nathan flanked her on either side, their expressions hard but determined. Let's do this, Zara said, her voice low but resolute. They pushed through the door and made their way to the front desk. The officer on duty looked up at them, his eyes narrowing slightly as he saw the seriousness in their faces. Can I help you? He asked. Zara didn't waste any time. She pulled out her phone and slid it across the counter. I have evidence. It's about Montgomery and his operations. I need to speak with someone in charge. The officer hesitated, eyeing the phone. Zara could see the skepticism in his gaze, but she didn't falter. She had the proof. She had everything she needed. He could either help her, or he could ignore it, but if he did, she'd make sure everyone knew his name. After a long moment, the officer nodded. Wait here. I'll get the lieutenant. Zara, Emily, and Nathan exchanged tense glances as they waited. Every second felt like an eternity, the air thick with anticipation. It wasn't just the police they had to worry about now. Montgomery had his fingers in every corner of the city, and they couldn't be sure who was on his side. Minutes later, the officer returned, followed by a lieutenant. The man was tall, his face hard and unreadable. He looked at the phone, then back at Zara, his expression cautious but curious. You're sure about this? The lieutenant asked. Zara nodded. I have the proof. Everything you need to take Montgomery down. He didn't speak for a moment, his eyes scanning the phone as he processed the information. Finally, he looked up. Follow me. Zara and her friends followed the lieutenant through the building, their hearts pounding in their chests. The walls of the police station seemed to close in around them, the weight of what they were doing pressing on their shoulders. They had made it this far. Now they had to see it through. The lieutenant led them to a small office at the back of the building. He closed the door behind them, and they all sat around the desk, the air thick with tension. Let's see what you've got, the lieutenant said. Zara handed over the phone. She watched as the lieutenant clicked through the footage, his face growing more serious with every frame. The illegal dealings, the threats, the money exchanges, it was all there. It was more than enough to make a case against Montgomery. When he finished watching, the lieutenant looked up at Zara. This is overwhelming, he said, his voice low. But it's enough. We'll start the investigation immediately. Zara exhaled slowly, her body sagging with relief. For the first time in days, she felt like a weight had been lifted off her chest. They had done it. They had taken the first step to bring Montgomery down. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I just want to make sure he can't hurt anyone else. The lieutenant nodded. We'll make sure of that. But you need to be careful now. Montgomery won't go down without a fight. Zara's heart sank. She had known it wouldn't be easy, but hearing it from the lieutenant made the danger feel even more real. Montgomery was ruthless, and he wouldn't stop until he had everything back under his control. "We'll stay out of sight," Emily said, her voice firm. "But we'll be ready to help however we can." The lieutenant gave a curt nod, then stood. "I'll make sure we move fast. Get yourselves to safety." As Zara, Emily, and Nathan left the station, the weight of the situation settled heavily on Zara's shoulders. The battle wasn't over. In fact, it was only just beginning. But they had made it this far. They had the evidence, they had the truth, and now, they had the police on their side. Zara took one last look at the building, knowing that Montgomery wouldn't go down without a fight. But she was ready. Ready to fight back. Ready to bring him down. The storm was coming, but Zara was prepared to face it head-on. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?